Imagine you're a Roman soldier standing at the edge of the known world. Behind you are roads, forts, farms, and order. The empire feels solid, like stone. In front of you is the north, gray water, violent winds, and a horizon that looks unfinished. No cities, no clear maps, only fog, stories, and the sense that the world becomes stranger the farther you go. Rome conquered lands from Spain to Syria. Rome crossed deserts, mountains, and rivers. Rome crushed kingdoms that once seemed untouchable. So why would Rome fear an island to the north? Why would an empire built on confidence hesitate at the edge of cold seas? Here's the truth that makes this story more interesting than any myth. Rome's fear was not superstition. It was strategy. For Rome, fear wasn't a feeling. It was a calculation, risk, cost, and reward. And the far north was the kind of place where costs kept rising while rewards stayed small. But first, what island are we talking about? In Roman imagination, there were several northern islands wrapped in danger and secrecy. There were the islands beyond Britain, Orkney and Shetland. Remote, wind-scored, difficult to reach safely. There was Hibernia, what we call Ireland, close enough to be tempting, but uncertain enough to be costly. And then there was the most famous name of all, Thule, described like a boundary between the human world and something colder and less familiar. Sometimes Thule was a real place seen through imperfect geography. Sometimes it was a symbol, the ultimate north, where daylight behaves strangely and sea and sky blur together. Whatever the exact identity, the message is clear to Romans. The far north was a place where the empire's advantages weakened. Rome's real power was not only its army. It was its system, roads, supply lines, taxation, administration, and predictable logistics. Rome could conquer because Rome could feed legions, pay them, move them, and reinforce them. But the far north damages machines. It is colder, wetter, stormier, and less forgiving. It punishes travel and punishes mistakes. A commander's greatest danger isn't always an enemy army. It's being cut off. An isolated legion in hostile territory can be destroyed not by one great battle, but by attrition, hunger, raids, sickness, cold, and morale collapse. And islands make that risk sharper, because once you land, your exit depends on the sea, exactly when the sea may be most dangerous. Then comes the question of reward. Rome didn't conquer just to paint maps. Rome conquered because conquest paid. Taxes, resources, slaves, prestige, strategic depth. The far north did not promise easy conversion. No huge cities to seize. No obvious treasure. No rich core to justify years of war. High cost, low reward. That is the Roman definition of a place to fear. Where Rome's power weakened, fog, storms, endless coast. Rome's empire was built for a world it could connect. Roads, forts, supply depots, ports. Rome conquered and then stitched territories into a network. That network turned victory into control. But the farther north Rome went, the more the network frayed. Because the north is not just colder, it is unpredictable. And unpredictability is poison to an empire. Roman campaigns relied on rhythm, move, build, secure, supply, reinforce, repeat. In the far north, seasons and routes don't behave politely. Rain turns ground into mud. Rivers swell, winds trap ships. Fog hides coastlines. Storms arrive fast. For any expedition to a northern island, Orkney, Shetland, Ireland, or the symbolic Thule, the first enemy is the sea. Northern waters are rougher and less forgiving than the Mediterranean. A storm can scatter fleets and strand men. Navigation is harder, safe harbors fewer, and withdrawal can be more dangerous than combat. If you cannot guarantee supply, you cannot guarantee conquest. Britain itself was already a warning. Rome conquered much of it, but northern campaigning remained stubborn and expensive. Enemies could avoid decisive battles, raid supply lines, and force Rome to bleed for every mile. An island beyond Britain would be one more step into a world of diminishing returns. An island also raises the cost of permanence. It isn't conquered once, it must be garrisoned forever. That means ships to resupply it, ports, infrastructure, and constant military presence. If the island offers little economic return, it becomes a drain, not a province. This is why Roman fear was fear of wasting legions. Soldiers hate wars that feel endless. No surrendered king, no captured capital, just mud, fog, and raids. Morale breaks when victory has no clear shape, especially when supply is uncertain. Rome feared the far north because it went far enough to understand the price. Roman power wasn't only about annexation, it could also be about reach, showing that Rome could touch you. Fleets could sail coasts, scouts gather information, raids punish enemies, and brief landings could send political messages. But touch is not control. Control requires permanence, and permanence in the far north is expensive. If the island was Ireland, conquest would not be simple because power was scattered. There was no single capital you seized to own the whole island. Conquest becomes endless intervention and permanent garrisons. Rome could do it, but why pay the price if the return is unclear? If the island was Orkney or Shetland, logistics become harsher, smaller land, more punishing sea, fewer safe harbors. A single storm could cut supply. A few lost ships could isolate a garrison for months. That is a liability. If the island was Thule, the symbolic far north, then the issue is the boundary of navigable certainty. The farther you push, the less reliable maps become and the more the world behaves differently from Rome's familiar rules. Even an empire cannot conquer uncertainty cheaply. This is why walls matter. A wall is a decision made of stone. It marks where Rome chooses stability over endless chasing. Hadrian's Wall represents Rome drawing a line not only against enemies, but against cost. Rome could cross the line, it chose not to commit permanently beyond it. Roman fear was therefore the fear of a bad campaign, storms swallowing ships, garrisons trapped without resupply, armies dragged into wars with no decisive end. The far north exposed Rome's limits, not in courage, but in conversion. Rome could conquer armies, but turning fog and scattered resistance into a stable province was another kind of fight. In the final part, we'll answer the question sharply. What exactly Rome feared, and why that secret island represents the empire's most uncomfortable truth. Some territories aren't conquered by strength, but by willingness to bleed forever. The secret island because it believed in magic. Rome feared it because Rome understood limits. For an empire, limits are terrifying because they reveal places where conquest cannot be turned into stable control. The Roman logic is simple. If we go there, we will have to keep going there. A conquest that cannot be stabilized becomes a permanent drain. Constant garrisons, constant supply, constant response to raids and revolt. The far north fights predictability through storms, tides, harsh seasons, scattered power, and resistance that doesn't offer a decisive end. That's why walls matter again. A wall is Rome choosing control over endless expansion. Its imperial maturity prioritizing what can be held sustainably. The North Island, whether Ireland, Orkney, Shetland, or symbolic Thule, sits in the category of luxury frontiers. You might raid it, explore it, intimidate it, but permanent occupation is costly. Rome also feared embarrassment. A failed northern expedition would not only cost lives, it would broadcast that Rome has edges. Edges invite challenges. So Rome prefers boundaries it can defend consistently rather than committing to campaigns where nature and distance can make Rome look powerless. So what did Rome fear, really? High logistical risk, violent seas, unpredictable weather, enemies who avoid decisive defeat, low economic payoff, permanent occupation burden, the chance of losing legions for territory that never becomes a stable province. That is Roman fear, not superstition, but a trap, an investment of blood with no return. So when you hear, the island Rome feared, don't picture monsters in the fog. Picture a Roman general looking at a stormy horizon and realizing something simple. There are places where victory is not a moment. It is a commitment. And some commitments are not worth the blood.